Welcome to episode 0.17 of At Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming for July 22nd, 2018. Let's roll. And welcome back, and thank you for joining us once again for this crazy project that has hit 800 downloads during our last episode 16 or 0.16. We hit 800 downloads, and let me tell you, there's nobody more surprised than me. So I just want to thank everybody for downloading it. That's on the audio podcast only, by the way. So that's through the subscription channels on mostlylinux.libsyn.com. That's Libsyn, libsyn.com. If you're not a subscriber, please just go there, mostlylinux.libsyn.com, and you can find our podcast. You can stream it in your web. You can subscribe to it on Apple, Stitcher, whatever you've got out there, Spotify, even Google Play. We're all over the place. And join the group. But a heartfelt thank you for everybody out there that listens and participates and watches. I like to say that I would do this if nobody was listening or watching, and I probably would, but it's better to have you there. In any case, our featured distribution this week is Manjaro 17.1.11. You can see it running on my desktop here. This is running at 4K on my monitor. It's downsampled to 1080p for the streams if you're watching a video. You know, last week I decided to get really all ambitious and code the video podcast at 4K. And I'm not doing that anymore. You know what? I've got an i7 Haswell refresh. So it's not new, but it's quad core 8 thread, running at a pretty high frequency. I've got a GTX 1070, but I think encoding and that kind of stuff is really more of a function of the CPU. But to encode the 4K stream took over 11 hours last week. And, while that was a good experiment, it leaves little flexibility. The file size is also extraordinarily large too. So uploading it and doing all of that stuff was a bit of a pain. So I'm going to revert back and stay on 1080p for the foreseeable future. Until maybe someday when I get a Threadripper or 2 or 3 or whenever that may be, and then maybe I'll give it a try again. In any case, our featured distribution, Manjaro 17.1.11, you can see it here. I am actually, Manjaro comes with the XFCE desktop environment as a default. You can see that I'm running it here on Budgie. The beautiful thing about Arch-based distributions is access to the Arch user repository. So they really are incredibly robust and incredibly flexible. I know that you can put Budgie on other unsupported distributions as well, but it's been very seamless running Budgie on Manjaro. I just basically downloaded Manjaro XFCE and then changed the desktop environment to my personal favorite, which is Budgie. And that works well. So the question often is why Manjaro over Antergos. I mean, last week I was waxing poetic over the beauty and the wonder that I had around Antergos, and I still do. I think I prefer Antergos to Manjaro, having tested both of them now for roughly a week each. If I was to default to one, I probably would go to Antergos. But having said that, If I've got a good setup on Manjaro, would I switch? There probably isn't any reason to. You know, you can make Manjaro more like Antergos if you want. I think Antergos has a harder time becoming more like Manjaro, because one of the key differences between the two distributions is that Manjaro maintains its own repositories that are effectively proprietary to it, and so Antergos doesn't access those repositories. But you know, the big draw for Arch builds is the Arch user repository, and both have access to the AUR. Both use the same package manager, PacMac. They're very similar. What I did to help figure out the differences was I did a search here, and Freedom Penguin, I guess last updated November 2017, did a comparison between Manjaro and Antergos that I looked through, and I mean, for the most part, it meets my my experience as well. This is from Freedom Penguin, November 2017. I'm just going to read from it. Arch Linux is famous for its guiding set of principles: simplicity, modernity, pragmatism, user centrality, and versatility. So that's kind of the basis of Arch. Arch is a built from scratch operating system based on the Linux kernel. And you know, it would be, for example, similar to other built from scratch operating systems like Debian, for example, or Solus, for example. Ubuntu, as kind of to contrast that, is built on Debian, and then other builds, for example, Elementary OS, is then built on Ubuntu. So you're kind of building on a build on a build. Arch itself is like Debian in the sense that it is built from scratch, and both Antergos and Manjaro, if you're familiar to the Ubuntu world, are effectively then built on Arch, just like Ubuntu is built on Debian. So they have a lot in common, but at the same time, you know, they have different niches, let's say, in terms of who they are targeting. Now, Antergos, according to this Freedom Penguin article, is basically Arch. It's as close to Arch as you can get without being Arch. I actually downloaded and was messing around with Direct Arch myself this week, and basically Arch effectively boots into a terminal, right? There's you know, there's no hand holding in Arch. If you want to get Arch going, you better know what you're doing from the ground up. And so it's not really very accessible. And so Antergos, going back again to Freedom Penguin, where Antergos differs from Arch comes down to the fact that Antergos is built to make using the distribution simple. Antergos comes with a GUI installer, plus it also has a great feature selection tool to make customizing your desktop experience dead simple. And that's one of the key differences here between Antergos and Manjaro. I think where Antergos is significantly better than Manjaro is in the installation, feature selection, and customization as you are installing and building the system itself. It offers you a cornucopia of desktop environments, whereas Manjaro just comes with a few. It provides you with really an excellent, second to none, GUI based setup system. You know, outside of that, it's the main strength of Manjaro over Antergos is in the post setup environment. In Manjaro, you are provided with tools to manage the system that are more accessible than in Antergos. Plus, you also have that Manjaro dedicated repository. But let me show you probably the difference that makes the biggest difference for a lot of people using one versus the other. So in Manjaro, you have something called Manjaro Settings Manager, and there I run it up, and this is not available in Antergos. And for many people, this is, you know, a big deal, because in Antergos you have to kind of either go to the CLI, or you have to kind of know more or less what you're doing, or it's just automated. In Manjaro, the hardware configuration with respect to your GPU settings there's essentially an app for it, so you can control it, change your drivers from proprietary to open source, and then manage your driver settings. I, having used Manjaro first and then Antergos, found that very confusing. I was kind of, you know, clicking around in Antergos trying to figure out how to get the latest graphics driver for my card, and looking for this hardware configuration tool, which just does not exist. The other key advantage, I would say, of Manjaro is the kernel manager. There is an actual application called Kernel in the Manjaro settings manager that allows you to select whatever kernel that you wish to use, including the LTS kernels, the latest real-time update, and then the latest experimental build. And through this, you can switch your kernel easily and accessibly, and it makes kernel management much easier in Manjaro than in Antergos. And that's, you know, that's more or less, I would say, the long and the short of the difference between the two. Antergos, I would say, is a tad more advanced than Manjaro. In other words, if you are, you know, if you want to be handheld, let's say, a little more, Manjaro is probably the better alternative. Antergos is a little more for intermediate users. Even, you know, it's not that hard, but it's just a step above Manjaro. And then Arch, of course, is you know, is more hardcore. And if you are hardcore and you think that is, you know, an unreasonable comment because, you know, it's so easy if you just know the command line, like most people don't, right? Most people want to use rather than program. So in any case, I would, you know, I would recommend both. I would say that for gaming, I would probably stick to an Arch-based distribution. I know that Ubuntu tends to be considered the standard, but if you are, you know, if you're an intermediate plus, if you have intermediate plus familiarity with Linux, in my opinion, Arch-based distros are superior to Ubuntu-based distros. But hey, that's the beauty of Linux, is that you can choose. And so this week we've chosen to go with Manjaro. Like I said, you know, I would recommend it. You really can't go wrong with Manjaro. It's you know, it's good. In any case, I mean, I think we can kind of push forward a couple of additional things actually here before I move past into the newsfeed section. First of all, shout out to the London Spitfire. Let's put the picture up here. The London Spitfire is an Overwatch League team based out of London, and they are the first finalists in the Overwatch League Grand Finals, and that is just terrific. They've had an amazing playoff run so far, defeating the Los Angeles Valiant 3-0 in the last game. They beat them 3-1 in the first game, so they swept them, and they will be in the Grand Finals next week, July 27th and 28th in New York City. I think I read somewhere that the London Spitfire is a team of Koreans owned by a company in Los Angeles, playing out of London, heading to New York for the Overwatch League finals, and that warms my heart, the internationalness of it. So congratulations to the London Spitfires tonight. The New York Excelsior are going to try not to be eliminated and swept by the Philadelphia Fusion. They're playing tonight. The winner of that series is going to play against the Spitfires for the championship. Right now, the Fusion are ahead 1-0, and so if they win the next game, they will join London in the finals. New York would have to come back and do a reverse sweep to be able to make it to the finals. Now, New York was ranked number 1. They only lost 6 games of 40 in the regular season. The Valiant was ranked number 2. So the second, the number 2 slot's been knocked out, and if New York is tossed out tonight, that'll be 2 pretty big upsets going into the finals, and who doesn't like an underdog? So again, congratulations to the Fusion. And finally, up here on the top right of the screen, in fact, we didn't play it, we're going to be streaming Metro Exodus in our non-sponsored video this week. Metro is a series, a first-person shooter series based on some Russian novels that have had absolutely amazing Linux ports. And in fact, it's one of the few games that actually runs better and faster and is better optimized in Linux than in Windows or Mac. So if you have this, the best experience of the game across PC, consoles, and so forth is on Linux, and that's good to see every once in a while, particularly from an outfit that is not called Valve. So Exodus is coming out. I believe it's been delayed, last I heard, to 2019. There's no official word on a Linux version, but the 2 previous versions and their remakes were all available day and date on Linux. I expect the same here, and I hope to see the game being as well optimized as the previous games are and were for Linux. So we're just going to stream that up in the top right for you to enjoy the wonderful graphic intensity of the game. In any case, that's our small talk. I'll be back in 10 seconds with the news. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us here on Mostly Gaming number 17. Now we've got the news feeds, and we've got a couple of interesting stories this week that we've been able to dig up. One is this story here about Winepaks. Hey, what happened to my Winepak story? And there it is. Winepak could make it easier to install Windows apps on Linux. This is a bit of an older story, and I've been letting it kind of develop before talking about it here on the podcast. But this comes from OMG Ubuntu. Winepak could make it easier to install Windows apps on Linux. This is a new way to get your favorite Windows apps and games. Effectively, what it is you know what? I'm just going to read from the webpage here. It's called Winepak, and as you might guess from the name, it's focused on packaging wine applications as flat pack bundles for faster, fuss-free use. I think I was calling it Winepak. I think it's actually Winepak. Let me correct that there. So rather than you having to head out and find an installer, open it with Wine, and jog through the various steps needed to install it correctly, you'd simply install an application from a Winepak. So it's like Flatpak or Snap, but for Windows packages, which is pretty cool. I mean, you know, it would certainly open it up to users if you can go Winepak, install blah, and then run whatever you want to run. It's not quite there yet, I would say. I have set it up. You know, you need to do some command line entries. You have to install Flatpak, and then you have to install Winepak, and then the apps that are available, you know, it says here Fortnite, Overwatch, World of Warcraft. You know, Fortnite no longer works. Fortnite does not work on Linux. So I you know, through Wine or through anything else, because of the cheat detection, I gather. And so there's really no point in packaging up Windows applications that won't run in Linux. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So I actually tried to install that to see what would happen, and it's no longer available. So good idea. Let's not put things in there. But you know, they've got a host of other Winepaks, including, if you want, you know, you can run Microsoft Internet Explorer 8. I assume that's in there more as a joke than that is something anybody would want to use. But they've got the Blizzard apps out there. They've got you know, a bunch of other things. And so up here, if you're watching the video, you know, I have set up the repositories. You know, you first need to set up the Flatpak repository if it's not set up. This is a new install of Manjaro, so it wasn't set up by default. And then you need to install the Winepak repository, and then you're basically good to go. So what I've done here is I basically set it up to install the Winepak for Overwatch, since Overwatch is what we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to press Y here and see what happens. I haven't tried this before. Hopefully it will do its work, and then at some point during the podcast I can run it and we can see if it worked. So yes. And it's installing org Winepak platform, and presumably it will do its job. I'm just going to leave it. I haven't done it before, but if it works, that would be a very positive indication for this project. I'm a big fan of things like this. You know, in terms of expanding the base of Linux users, I think it's one of the key areas. And you know, when we look at the next news story on Datamation, which is the top 10 reasons why desktop Linux failed, they, you know, one of them, as far as I'm concerned, is basically the lack of apps in the early days in terms of being able to use your legacy software. So, you know, you move over, it requires a new workflow. And you know, you don't have that bridge to kind of get you there. For the old timers here, you know, if you remember the switch from, you know, Windows, I'm gonna say there was Windows 95 and then 98, and then I think the switch to what effectively was Windows NT happened after then. I may be wrong there, but that required effectively new software, because they were moving from, I'm gonna guess it was probably the 16-bit versions to the 32-bit, and there was an incompatibility. I could be completely wrong there, but Windows NT was not compatible with the previous versions of Windows, and what Microsoft did to basically, you know, smooth the transition was they ported their main apps first, including Office, to Windows NT, and then the world kind of moved over eventually as well. There was, of course, OS2 at the same time that was competing, that had the same issue. And you know, the long and the short of it is that hand-holding made the transition easier. And they've got that listed here as point number 3, that Linux lacks legacy software. And I would say another point, you know, in terms of the top 10 reasons of the failure of desktop Linux, as they say here, is the lack of AAA gaming titles. Both of those issues are, in the short term, as a transition to get your user base up, helped, I guess the better word is mitigated, by having access to legacy Windows software and games. And Wine along with DXVK and the other, and perhaps Winepak could help there. But let's take a look here at Datamation's view as to the top 10 reasons why desktop Linux failed. The number one reason that they've got listed here is that Linux isn't pre-installed. I guess this is a no-brainer. You know, most people are going to go with the operating system that comes on their on the PC that they buy. So if you buy a Mac, you're going to use Mac OS, and if you buy a Chromebook, you're going to use Chrome OS, and if you buy a PC, you're probably going to use Windows. And in order to get Linux, you need to be advanced enough to be able to install it, and that is, I mean, is that 5% of the user base? I mean, what is the user base that would be willing to do that? Probably, you know, 5%. And if Linux has a market share of desktop Linux has a market share of 2.5 to 3%, that means that, you know, half of everybody that would be inclined or has the knowledge to change their operating system, you know, from the one that was pre-installed on their laptop or their desktop, is doing it. Okay, so that gives you kind of some indication that the prospects might be better, but it's just not available. And I think, you know, I don't see that changing in the short run. I know that there's Linux focused companies out there. I think System 76 is one. I think they just opened up a new facility in Colorado, so to expand their production. Purism is another one. You know, those are terrific things, but they're tiny, right? And you need to move Linux to mainstream PC builders like HP and Dell. Now, Dell is already there with some of their PCs, and my understanding is that sales of those are going pretty well enough that they haven't canceled them. I've got Ubuntu Budgie on my XPS 13. Works very well. But look, this is the first, I would say the first 5, maybe the first 9 reasons as to why desktop Linux failed. I don't like to use the word fail, but I guess we have to, given the small size of the user base. But you know, that's the main reason. If it was pre-installed on PCs, I would say 95% of the people that bought a PC with it pre-installed would just continue to use it. Number 2, they list here Linux freedom versus convenience. What is the point here? He's basically saying the greater takeaway is that when people are aware of the operating systems, they will usually stick with what they've used the longest. Okay, so what he's saying here is that people are used to Windows or Mac or what have you, and so, you know, they don't want to try something unfamiliar. I don't, you know what, I don't buy this point, and I certainly wouldn't make it number 2, because the evidence is people have and are willing to switch. Chrome OS, for example, is pre-installed on Chromebooks. They've got inexpensive, lightweight, decent laptop alternatives, and people have no issue switching over to it. In fact, I would say there's an even bigger example with respect to Android and iOS. I mean, those were completely new operating systems with an unfamiliar interface, and people had no problem moving over to them as well. So I think if there's an incentive for people to move over, they will. I would say that is probably not. I would say I disagree with that. Number 3 is the issue about Linux lacking legacy software. We talked about that already. Linux networking isn't for the faint of heart. Again, I don't really see this. I've never had a problem networking with any of my machines. And when was this written? July. So this was just written last week. Well, let's see what his issue is here. Networking in Linux is reliable. However, it's reliant on understanding the differences between Windows and Linux networking. In Linux, both Samba and NFS file sharing are config file based, and while it's not difficult to learn, it's not going to be as straightforward as you might find with Windows. Okay, so this is out of my kind of purview here in terms of if you're running a network at a corporate environment, and maybe you don't want Linux machines working on there because it messes up your system. I can understand that corporations and organizations are very protective of their systems because they don't want to take on the costs of supporting all sorts of different operating systems. And having said that, you know, I've run companies, I've owned companies, I've had mixed environments with Linux and Mac and iOS and Android and Windows, and I've never had a problem. At least I've never had anybody on the sysadmin side or the network administrator side come back and give me an issue with it. So I'll take Datamation's word for it. The article is by Matt Hartley. That it's a problem, I've never seen that as a problem. Point number 5 is that Linux video card support is tricky. It is. I think the main reason it's tricky is because so many of the distributions, you know, insist on installing Nouveau as the default, and Nouveau is horrible for NVIDIA cards. And NVIDIA is the best-selling graphics card maker in the world with the majority of the market share. So if we have builds out there, distributions that are basically being shipped out to people that are trying Linux for the first time, and they get a graphics driver pre-installed that is horrible, they are not going to be inclined to try to figure out how to install a proprietary graphics driver so that they can make their system work. That's always been a gripe of mine. You know, look, Nouveau is bad. It's horrible. It provides a bad experience for the user. Yes, freedom, you know, high fives, whatever. But at the end of the day, you know, the user should be paramount, and we should provide the best experience for them, you know, right off the gate. And so I would say that could be easily solved by basically installing distributions that use the proprietary graphics driver. Actually, Ubuntu Budgie has gone to great lengths to do that. They still do not install Nouveau, the proprietary drivers by default, but they do have a setup screen that does it straight up front for you. I think the reason that Ubuntu Budgie doesn't just install it is Ubuntu, which is based on Debian, which has as a principle you know, kind of a freedom first component. They want to create a stable, all open source operating system, and I think that requirement kind of drags on down to Ubuntu and then through to the flavors of Ubuntu. But you know, that's something that I think could be fixed. I do agree with it though, but again, I think I agree with it to the extent that the small number of people that try Linux may have that as a bad experience and then go away, as opposed to keeping them from doing it in the first place. Point number 6 is that Linux Pulse Audio Sound Server is confusing. Again, I'll take his word for it. I don't know much about that. I haven't had issues with audio. It is finicky, but so is Windows, to be honest with you. Number 7, Linux lacks AAA gaming titles. Yeah, can't argue with that. This podcast is really, one of our objectives is to normalize using both Linux native and Wine-based and other gaming platforms, because you don't have to be pure. You know, I mean, if you want to play a game, you know, use Linux, use Wine, and buy a console. Problem solved. Point number 8, Linux desktop environments. Yeah, there's a lot of different desktop environments. The lack of standardization in Linux is a challenge. I don't think that's a barrier, though. That's not a barrier to using it. That's maybe a barrier to the success of any one. And perhaps the issue is that if you had one dominant desktop environment and one dominant distribution, that maybe PC makers would be more inclined to carry it. But we do, and that's called Ubuntu, and that's called GNOME, and maybe it's called Dell. You know, Linux is what you want it to be, and I think if you want it to be a no-brainer for somebody's grandmother, you could do that without a problem. Linux distros vary in quality was point number 9. There's no question about that. And Linux is overshadowed by Chrome OS. Yes. But you know what? Okay, so Matt Hartley, I think you did a good job here. Interesting points. But I think look, it's tough making a list of 10 when really the problem is the first 9 slots is this. Linux isn't pre-installed. And the reason that I don't think Linux is being overshadowed by Chrome OS per se. I think Linux is being overshadowed by the hardware that Chrome OS is pre-installed in. And you have somebody like Google who is pushing a Linux distribution like Chrome OS, and you see that all of these other barriers that are listed here that apply to Chrome OS, and probably more so than a typical Linux distribution like Ubuntu, did not get in the way of Chrome OS becoming and generating higher market share than Linux over a short period of time. I would basically, my top 10 list would be points number 1 through 9, Linux isn't pre-installed, and point number 10, probably this point about Linux lacking legacy software, which I think is addressed. But even addressing all of those problems with respect to legacy software and gaming probably gets you up to that 5% market share, which is the number of people that would ever be inclined to change the operating system that comes pre-installed on their PC. Now, having said that, I've gone back to the terminal here where I was installing the Winepak for Overwatch, and it says, warning, failed to install. It gives me some errors, free desktop, blah, 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 the name, I don't know, failed to install for some reason or other. So as we can see, Winepaks are not there yet. I'm not going to go through kind of trying to figure out what went wrong right there, but this is not where it needs to be something that is usable by normal people. And I tend to probably in the continuum be closer to normal people than to people that can figure out these errors. So I will just go to Lutris and do my DXVK, and I will be able to install Overwatch over there. And when Winepaks get to the point where they can package it up, include technologies like DXVK, put it all together, and then have some kind of put them in the software store, and then click on them like you would any other app, and then have them run, that will solve that problem number 3 or something along those lines would need to happen. Okay, our last news story here is FOSSMint has picked the 40 Linux games that you must play in 2018. And I'm going to put this, I like these kinds of lists. I'm surprised that he got to 40. This is by Martins D. Okoye of FOSSMint. Thank you, Martins. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm going to call you Martin. Because I think typically in most languages where there's an S at the end, I don't know. I'm going to call you Martin. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, Martin. So this is FOSSMint, 40 Linux games that you must play in 2018. His number 1 game, interestingly enough, is Civilization 6, which I bought on launch day with the, whatever the deluxe bundle is. I've got thousands of hours in Civilization 5. So yes, I've got Civilization 6. Civilization 6 has been a bit disappointing for Linux fans in that it's been buggy. There's no crossplay with Mac or Windows users. Actually, there is crossplay between Linux and Mac, but not with Windows and either of those platforms. There was some spyware that was embedded in there. That came, I believe, from Take-Two rather than from Firaxis, and yeah, just lots of complaining. The initial game that came out on launch day was very disappointing. I think I played through it and then thought, you know what, Civilization 5 is better in every way, except for maybe the graphics. So I went back to Civ 5. With the latest Rise and Fall add-on, I would say Civilization 6 is now a better game than Civilization 5, finally. And more recently, Feral and possibly Firaxis, which was responsible for the Linux port. Firaxis certainly has announced that cross compatibility with Windows is coming soon. They've already got that with the Mac version, and the PC version will be, sorry, the Linux version will be cross compatible. I believe they said in a week. So that problem is going to be solved, and I believe Feral has said as well, or perhaps this is coming actually from Firaxis, the developer, that they have gotten rid of the spyware that was embedded in there. Red something. It's basically a spyware component that is embedded into the game by the marketing mobs that want to know what you are doing on your computer. And specifically what it did was it would basically track the ads that you were looking at on your browser, and then trying to determine whether those ads were leading to you buying the game. And what advertisers want to know is, of course, how effective their ads are, and they're willing to pay for it. So they were trying to basically install this in there to get a reading on that. And it's not only on Civ 6, it's on a bunch of other titles. I did some kind of looking into it, and maybe we'll touch on it when I go through my tweets in a later segment. But it appears that most developers don't like it and blame it for crappy performance, and some publishers like it because it helps them to monetize it. But in any case, that's Civilization 6. I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm not sure I'd make it number 1, but it's certainly up there. Number 2 is Dirt Rally. Number 3 is Everspace. Number 4 is This War of Mine. Number 5 is War Thunder. Number 6 is On Raid. Number 7 is Dota 2. Number 8 is Super Tux Kart. Number 9 is Zero AD. I don't know that one. Zero AD started as a mod for Age of Empires 2, and then went on to be regarded as one of the coolest FOSS game projects ever. It's an engaging warfare game that sets players in a fictional historical time period. Make no mistake, though, the civilizations were once real, as the developers took their time to delicately include historical... That actually sounds very interesting. Is anybody... I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but I am going to play the trailer. Okay, that's cool. That looks enough. I mean, I think that's worth a play. They've got a link right here on the FOSSMint website. Let's, apparently you can play it for free. Play0ad.com. Instructions for Windows, Linux, OS X, and is available in the, so basically it's available in the community, in the Arch user repository. For Arch, there's a Debian file, so it's basically available everywhere. Alrighty, thank you very much, Martin from FOSSMint. You gave me a new game to try out, and a free one at that. Number 10, just completing out the top 10, is Kith. This looks like a black and white mystery mini adventure series game that is also free. Now, interestingly enough, I guess, I'm not going to go through all 40 of them. You can get them at, as I said, FOSSMint. It's www.fossmint.com. Just do a search for 40 Linux games that you must play in 2018, and it's there. A lot of these games are not released in 2018. It's that you must play in 2018, but not. It's a bit misleading in the sense that most of these games were not released in 2018. But if you want to look at games to play, many of the games on this list are free as well, and open source in some cases. yeah, give it a shot. I like work like that. You know what? It takes a lot of work to put together these big lists that we then subsequently, put our ad blockers on and browse through. So a shout out there to Martin the Okoy, which put this up yesterday. And good work, Martin. And thank you very much for putting together the list. In any case, that's it for our newsfeed this week. I'm going to be back in 10 seconds with what we've been tweeting. And we're back. Thank you for staying with us here on at Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming, episode number 17. Just bear with me here while I install 0AD. For those of you that aren't familiar with Arch, what I did was I just basically went into the Arch user repository. There's commands that you can use. There's different ways to get into it. I used Yout here, and I basically just typed up that and said get me 0AD from the user repository, and that's what it is doing right now. It is downloading it. That is how easy Winepak needs to be, and even that is too complicated for mainstream users. But once we get to this point for Winepak, then we can package this up in a GUI and make it usable for everybody else. But in any case, just wanted to kind of mention how I was packaging up how I was getting my applications here on Manjaro. That's my favorite part. The reason to use Arch is this repository, and there's risks involved, because people can put crap on there that can do stuff to your system. So you got to be careful. That stuff usually kind of is identified very quickly, and but stick to the main repository, stick to the main apps, and you'll be more than fine. In any case, let's take a look at the tweet universe and see what we have been tweeting about, because there were some interesting stories this week that I wanted to kind of touch on here. Let's take a quick look at my recent notifications. Okay, all right, that speaks to our topic of the week. Let's go to our tweets. Tweet. Alrighty, enough. All right, so one of the let's just go through our tweets here. This is actually a really nice quote that I saw from the esports writer at Fion on Fire. He posted, "London at Spitfire are an all-Korean team who play for a city in England who are owned by an org that is centralized in Los Angeles and are on the verge of making an international grand final in New York." I paraphrased this tweet earlier on in the small talk, but that is a cool, well put esports writer, Fion on Fire. The other, I guess, so the other point that I just wanted to kind of chat on was No Man's Sky's creator Sean Murray is attempting a redemption here. He was interviewed on a number of different websites. I think there was an interview on Eurogamer. There was an interview here on IGN, where he talks about the bullying that he had to endure as a result of the disappointment around the launch of No Man's Sky. And I do not for a second doubt that he endured bullying and abusive behavior. There was so much hatred around the launch of No Man's Sky that he, without a doubt, suffered harassment, as bad as anybody does. And there's no call for that. Okay, that's just BS. You can have respectful disagreements with people. You can actually even take action to offset, nonsense that happens in the real world without resorting to the kinds of threats and just, abject vile that comes on Twitter and the internet and social media in general, which is going to be really our focus on topic this week as well. But you know what? I mean, I saw this story as being so freaking hypocritical because IGN and the rest of the media were entirely complicit in the over promotion, just the nonsensical over promotion of this game years before it was ever launched. And it happens in journalism and in the games media with scare quotes more than in any other media that I've seen. I don't know why. It could be because the average games media journalist is younger and less experienced and prone to hyperbole, but I don't. But the media created the completely unrealistic expectations that surrounded this game. They inflated this guy to the point that he could only explode, and to his detriment, he went with it and promoted it. Okay, he didn't sit there and say, oh no, this is, he had this faux humility, but really he promoted the nonsense as and manipulated the media as much as anybody could. And then when it all fell apart and his game was a piece of trash, yeah, there was people disappointed. No excuse for the hatred of for the hate-filled comments. I guess you could hate the game, but but there was a basis in the fact that this guy, people felt ripped off. They felt that he had stolen, in effect, their money by a combination of the nonsense that he was basically putting out there, including doctored video, coupled with the BS promotion from a gullible media, and then pushed to pre-order the game before it launched. And if you were one of those people that in good faith took everything in good faith, yeah, you were pretty angry. So, let's not come back now, Mr. Murray, and scream or claim that you are now a victim so that we can feel sorry for you. I do not feel sorry for you, sir. You had this coming in terms of your fall from grace, but I do not respect or accept the hate-filled vial that you necessarily had to deal with. But that comes with the marketing strategy that you basically put together. And my friend, you knew your game could not stand up to it. You knew it. You knew it. Okay? And so people calling you a liar is fair game. In any case, the worst of the people that basically participated in that was IGN. In this particular interview right here, where this gentleman here, Ryan McCaffrey, who for whatever reason has blocked us, and I'm happy to hear it. I want people to block us because that means we're getting there. Okay? And Ryan, you're not going to listen to this because you blocked me. I don't have an issue with you per se, but you are gullible. Okay? You're not a very good critic. Okay? You are a promoter of IGN and of the games and of the Xbox and of the things that you run, but you are not a very good critical reviewer of things. Okay? You are also extremely gullible. And this interview here, which you can get on YouTube, No Man's Skies, Sean Murray, IGN Unfiltered 06, was when this game jumped the shark. This was the most fawning, over-the-top, ridiculous interview I have ever seen. And this dude right here, Sean Murray, that's on the screen right now, he plays his cards so well. Okay, he comes across both as a humble, humility-filled person that you tend to want to like, but at the same time, his brain is so big it cannot contain him. Okay, his ego has grown to the point where it can explode. He accepts ridiculous claims about his game with humility, as if oh, I don't know how I can be such a genius. I never thought that I would be. And we just created this amazing thing that is so wonderful, and I'm so humbled by it. But he is lying through his teeth throughout it. Okay? Either that or he believes his own lies. And Ryan just feeds his ego over and over and over again. Okay? It is the closest you can come to watching two men have sex without being on Pornhub, okay? and so, you know, I tweeted about this when it came up, just because the hypocrisy did not escape me. And let me kind of go back to those particular tweets. Maybe it's on my maybe it's not on my tweets. Maybe it's on my tweets and replies. And so I posted that. Let's go through the thread here. I said, I'm sorry to hear of No Man's Sky's hardships and the bullying he endured. However, he should take responsibility for his deceptive marketing and doctored videos. At IGN should also take responsibility for their wild over-promotion, in particular by at DMC Ryan, which is Ryan McCaffrey. Maybe that's why he blocked me. Somebody else came back and said, true, but at DMC Ryan wasn't alone in the hyperbole. At No Man's Sky hit the mainstream and continued to promote unattainable goals to a gullible media. On the other hand, he's now rich and miserable rather than poor and miserable. Good point there, at Grayson. I responded, I'll give you that. At No Man's Sky appeared on at Conan O'Brien, for Christ's sakes. But that podcast in which Ryan McCaffrey compared him to the all-time video game greats like Hideo Kojima and Richard Garriott takes the cake. Yes, that is the video that I was just showing. And I'm happy to say that Richard Garriott actually tossed us a like for that comment. I mean, come on. Richard Garriott is one of the greats of video games of all time, proven, over the course of, I don't know, a dozen Ultima games. He sold his empire to Electronic Arts. The man has been to the moon. Oh, he hasn't been to the moon. He has been in space. And I think he ended up purchasing a piece of the moon or something. But come on, you're comparing Richard Garriott to a guy that before he's even released his game. I mean, you created IGN, the monster that you are now kind of claiming as a victim. Sean, I wish you all the best. Okay, you please don't play the victim card. Okay, you became a millionaire overnight, from some shady ass marketing tactics with this game. Okay, and you didn't give the money back. Okay, so you're still rich. Okay, the people that you fooled into pre-ordering your game still gave you their money, and you didn't give it back. And and so now coming back and saying about how hurt you were, the people called you names, is a bit much for me. But again, I don't support hate on the internet because there's no need for that. Let's take a look at some of the other tweets here. That was just probably the most ridiculous thing I saw all week. Maybe kind of close to the issues with respect to James Gunn. I'm going to talk about that a little bit that is going to be actually our focus on topic this week, focus on politics and decency, which I guess ties together this story with this story on James Gunn. That is one sick bastard, let me tell you. And I won't go into it now because that'll be a topic for later on. The other, I would say, the other main tweet topic for me of the week is this return of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a TV reboot that is in development from Joss Whedon. So a couple of things here. First of all, Buffy, one of the best series of all time on television, is coming back and Joss Whedon is going to be a part of it. Those two components are really necessary. They need to go hand in hand for this to work. For those of you that are not familiar with Buffy, it's available on Netflix. It's available out there. You should give it a whirl, particularly seasons 1 to maybe 4. 5, 6, and 7 are not as strong. Maybe 5 is actually not bad. 6 and 7 for sure, not as good. But yeah, Buffy is important because it turned on its head. And again, this is the 90s now that we're talking about, probably before many of you were born, certainly before my kids were born. And after my daughter was born, once she got a little bit old enough, I used Buffy as a means of encouraging female empowerment in her, because it turned the tropes about the young woman that needs help, that even today, Star Wars 8, for example, tries to take up, but many 20, 30 years later, right? Buffy was doing them back in the early 90s, mid 90s. And this kind of idea of this, cheerleader, dumb blonde kind of thing, who slays dragons, slays vampires, turned it on its head. She didn't need helping from anybody. Okay, she wasn't dumb. She was empowered, and she was not the victim. She was the defender and the attacker. And then you couple that around the whole kind of Scooby club of supporting cast, and one of the greatest television series of all time, groundbreaking. And I look forward to seeing what comes back, and also how they basically continue how they maintain the continuity. In the last episode of Buffy, I won't spoil it for everybody if you guys want to go see it, but there was changes to the universe as the episodes finished, and then season 8, I believe, was described as canon in comic book form. And that just kind of took a really weird twist. If you kind of go through that, I kind of stopped following it. I read through season 8, the comic version, because I wanted to see what happened, but it just kind of got comic book crazy after a while. So I'm not sure how they're going to maintain that continuity in the television series, or whether it's going to be a reboot. My understanding is it will be some kind of a reboot, an in-universe reboot with an African American protagonist, which I wish they had mentioned, because why can't we just have her be a protagonist rather than identifying her race? But since they did, I will as well. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There's actually 2 Joss Whedon television series in development now. One is coming to HBO, and one is apparently this one here. So I'm a big Joss Whedon fan, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got coming here. Anyway, that's our tweets. Let me come back in 10 seconds with our Discovery queue. And we're back with our Discovery queue. GOG version. What the heck is that all about? Let me actually just clear up some of these old tabs here. There we go. This week, I thought, why don't, I'm always doing our Discovery queue on Steam, and I know many of you are fans of GOG.com. So I thought I'll do the Discovery queue. Let's check and see what's new on GOG rather than what's new on Steam. And I gotta say, there's not as many games here as there are on Steam, but I like the layout. Look, I can actually see what's happening. I don't have videos popping up, from some anime that I don't care about, getting in the way of what is new. And I don't have like a whole host of, cheap whatever knockoffs that I'm never going to care about. But, I'm not, look, I like Steam. Steam is my platform of choice because Valve supports Linux and GOG doesn't. There, I said it. Okay, yeah, these are on Linux, but you know, I got to basically download them through, you know, some. It's just not as good. Okay, and where's The Witcher 3? Period. End of story. But I like the clean layout. Now let's take a look and see what's new. This game, Pathfinder Kingmaker, just popped up. I've never heard of it before. Apparently, it's coming out in September. You can pre-order it now for no particular reason. There's no reason to pre-order it, but it's out there. And I've not heard of this game before. It seems to have come out of nowhere. September is going to be a pretty busy time for gaming, and I've got 4 versions of it here at the top of GOG. They've got an Imperial Edition for about $100. They've got a Royal Edition for about $80. They've got an Explorer Edition for $45, and they've got a Noble Edition for sale. This is just nuts. I mean, this is just nuts. You know, it is. I find the number of editions offensive. I don't even know what the issue is. That kind of turns me off the game, to be honest with you. But let's take a look and see what the game is about. I know nothing about it. Let's run the video.
You know what the trouble with most heroes' biographies is? They're always written years later. Every time I read about a heroic journey, I think to myself, why didn't they just bring a bard with them to write it all down properly?
Okay, so that's interesting. I still don't know what it is. Looks like a kind of like an RTS RPG. Do we have a description here? With the help of 18,000 Kickstarter backers, narrative designer Chris Avallone and composer Einon Zur, Owlcat Games is proud to bring you the first isometric computer RPG set in the beloved Pathfinder tabletop universe. Pathfinder Kingmaker puts you in the role of a brave adventurer fighting to survive in a world beset by magic and evil. Take on the role of a canny fighter hacking through enemies with an enchanted sword, a powerful sorceress blessed with magic by the hint of demon blood in her veins, a wise cleric of gods, benevolent or malignant, a witty rogue ready to defuse even the deadliest of traps, or any of the countless other heroes. The only limit is your imagination. The Pathfinder role-playing game is an evolution of the 3.5 rules of the 3.5 rule set of the world's oldest fantasy role-playing game. Okay, so it's a CRPG. The story. To the north lie the Stolen Lands, a region that has been contested territory for centuries. Hundreds of kingdoms have risen and fallen in these lands, and now it's time for you to make your mark by building your own kingdom. To do so, you'll need to survive the harsh wilderness and the threat of rival nations, as well as threats within your own court. Pathfinder Kingmaker is based on Paizo's award-winning Pathfinder adventure path, the same name. You certainly don't need to be familiar with the story, but if you are, you will encounter characters you know and love, as well as a host of brand new events, companions, allies, and threats. While Pathfinder Kingmaker is a single-player game, you won't be adventuring alone. The Kingmaker features a diverse cast of companions and NPCs, including iconic characters from the Pathfinder setting itself. You'll need to decide who to trust and who to watch carefully, as each companion has an agenda, alignment, and goals that may differ from yours. Alrighty. Okay, so this sounds interesting to me. I'm not going to pre-order it. But yeah. So what is this here? Do they have rankings? I don't see if they have rankings here. You know, I don't know why, why put up a pre-order for September now, but you know, it is coming, launch day on Linux, and I got to give them credit for that. I will put it on my wish list. And now it's wish listed, and let me kind of take a look when it comes closer to release. Looks interesting, and you know what? I appreciate the simplicity of the GOG interface in terms of finding it. Another game here is called State of Mind, which is on sale, 10% off, $40.49. When mind and machine becomes one, what will remain of humanity? Berlin 2048. The world is on the brink. Lack of resources, illnesses caused by polluted air and water, crime on the rise, war, governments and companies promise remedies through technological progress. Drones and humanoid robots replace humans in the public sector. Everything is interconnected. Surveillance has become omnipresent. Alrighty. So it's a dystopian future. And so what kind of a game is it? Does it tell me? Let's see. Is there a video? How about a video? Let's take a look at the video and see what the heck this is.
So what? I'm a journalist, Frank, not a stenographer. You were a journalist, and a damn good one. And what am I now? You've turned into a man with an agenda.
What will happen to my memory module? That's not relevant. It doesn't belong to you. Nothing of yours belongs to you. You don't belong to you. They promised that we would become one with the machines, the world spirit, the universe. They promised that we would become immortal. They promised to make gods of us, but they did not mean us. If you are with us, fight with us.
Okay, I still don't know what that game is about, and I've just watched the trailer. It looks interesting, but I don't know how it plays. Do they have another video? Maybe you can kind of just show some gameplay. Come on, people. Gameplay. It looks very cartoony. It looks very good, actually. Let's do one more trailer.
My heart is on fire, my strength in vain. I'm no more inspired to live pain again. I feel waves of tears rushing over my chest. Breathless, I fall to the ground. I want to, cause reality cut me like a knife. But now I do. No, I do, cause reality cut me like a knife.
Alright, so anyway, that video doesn't tell me anything about the gameplay either. It looks interesting enough anyway. It looks like it's got some terrific production values. The game is State of Mind. It is coming to Linux August 15th, 2018. It looks good. I just wish I could kind of figure out what the gameplay was from the videos. But that's fine. It's not out for another month, and we can get a good sense of what it is, I guess, between now and then. But you know what? I gotta give some props out to GOG in terms of discoverability. They certainly make it easier to find what's new on their platform. Surviving Mars has a Stellaris Dome set add-on. Warhammer 40,000, of course, that came out last week, and we talked about it, and then NeuroVoider. Did I not talk about that last week? I believe I did. Caves of Kood. So I think now we're going to last week's game. So the two big games on GOG this week for Linux, actually they're not this week. They're coming out soon. They're available for pre-order. State of Mind and Pathfinder Kingmaker. Now let me just compare that to what we've got on Steam. So let's take a look. see what Steam tells me is new and just kind of get a sense of the differences here. So I don't see, is Pathfinder Kingmaker available on Steam? It's not being promoted here in my featured and recommended or my discovery queue. So that game, which is incredibly interesting to me, I guess it's not being highlighted on Steam as it was. Well, it's not being highlighted necessarily on GOG. It's just the only game that's basically recently added to the GOG list for Linux. Is it available? It must be available on Linux. Pathfinder. Pathfinder. No, it's not coming up. Kingmaker. Oh no, there it is. Of course, same price. Okay, so it's got all the different versions here as well for the same price. Okay, so I mean, it is a little more kind of busy, let's say, on Steam than it is on GOG. Let's take a look and see what is new on Steam. So Steam is basically saying new and trending for Linux. I've got something called Stone's Hard Prologue. That's a free game. Let's take a look at some more expensive games. Cultist Simulator. Did I not talk about this last week? Yes, we did. Okay, so this was from last week as well. So nothing new over here either. Yeah, so you know what? Kind of head to head in terms of finding what's new. GOG does the better job. It's just cleaner and easier. It's less complex because they're not trying to feed me with as much information. Yay GOG, you win. You know what? The other game that I wanted to try, there's something called NeuroVoider. Let's take a look at NeuroVoider as well. That's a third game. I actually neglected to mention. NeuroVoider is new. Let's take a quick look at that as well. It's $14.99. And it's available both on Steam and GOG. It is available now. No, sorry. No, it was released last year. This is not a new game. Why is it popping up? This is kind of interesting because it popped up on both Linux and Steam. So, you know, something happened here to kind of pop it up in an algorithm somewhere. Why don't we just take a quick look at this? Alright. You know what? I've talked about this game before, so it's not new, although it did pop up as new on GOG. Why? I wonder why. Like, this is supposed to be, I've sorted GOG by new games, and for whatever reason, it's listed kind of just after Gladius, which came out last week, even though it came out a week ago. And Caves of Kood is kind of like in beta. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's mistaken. I'm not sure. It looks familiar, but if it's a year old, well, 7 months old, it doesn't belong in our new games list. Anyway, that's that. I'm going to pop back in about 10 seconds here with our focus on decency and politics. Give me 10 seconds.
I don't really try to be George Lucas. I love George Lucas. I look up to George Lucas, but I don't think of myself as George Lucas. You know, my whole movie is me and Chris Pratt walking around making jokes between sets. So I'm laughing constantly between takes. I love having Chris on set. We have a very similar sense of humor, and that joking around and doing bits is what makes the movie bearable for me.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is James Gunn, and he was fired from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 by Disney over offensive tweets, it says here in The Independent. And offensive really doesn't do his tweets justice. The man spent years tweeting about his fondness for young children and about the activities and actions that he either had done or wished he'd done or wants to do with them, including lewd, sexual, aggressive, and sometimes violent acts. I'm not going to go through the list of tweets that were released, but they are among the most despicable things that you can post on anything, never mind on something like Twitter, which is available to everybody. And so a conservative blogger decided to basically dig up these old tweets and then post them. And then everybody, of course, looked at them with shock and horror, as they rightly should. And Disney responded rightly, because I do not think that Disney would favor having people that talk about their fondness for young children sexually in their employ. And they fired him from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and from any future, hopefully future Disney projects. And then it kind of took a little bit of a strange twist, because what happened is it became political. Now, the bottom line of this story is simple. This guy is pretty messed up in the head, because he, for a long period of time, yes, it was in the past, okay, but tweeting about your fondness for young children is not something that you can simply apologize for. It is among the most despicable and heinous activities you can do. And not only did he talk about his fondness, he indicated that he may have participated in this and his joy at it. And he promoted these activities. Okay? That is generally referred to as pedophilia. And this is Disney. Okay? So is he a pedophile? Well, he came out subsequently and apologized. And he said that he did that in order to be a provocateur. And that he's changed and grown as a person. Yeah, as his wealth has, grown and his downside became bigger. Yeah, maybe he wants to cover it. At least that's my kind of feeling. But how do you choose to be a provocateur by talking about your fondness for young boys' penises? That's not being a provocateur. That's being a diddler. So he was hired. Apparently he was hired for Guardians of the Galaxy. These tweets existed, and now they've been dug up and Disney fired. You would think that'd be simple, okay? The proper reaction to this kind of behavior is disgust. It's not political. It is disgusting. But here's where it gets, really messed up in today's political environment. This guy, James Gunn, as with nearly everybody in Hollywood, is anti-Trump. And he would troll anti-Trump people because he is a self-stated provocateur, which kind of really goes against his statement about, he was a provocateur and now has changed. No, he's continued to be a provocateur, but just of a different kind. Okay, he stopped tweeting about little boys' penises and just started, tweeting about other stuff. But in any case, he is anti-Trump, as is almost all of Hollywood, and he increasingly, I don't follow the guy, right? But he, he would tweet about, anti-Trump people. He supported, for example, the firing of Roseanne, which is the tweet that you see here in front of me right now. And so it becomes like an ideological thing, right? Where he was outed by conservatives, and now he's being defended by liberals on the basis that, Disney should not fire him because he's grown as a person since he was a pedophile. Are you serious? Okay, that is just wrong. Okay, and it shouldn't be you support a liberal pedophile because you believe, in liberalism, or you hate Trump so much that it doesn't bother you that he was an admitted pedophile on Twitter, or that you do the same thing if it's a conservative pedophile. Okay, they're both wrong, and they both should be fired, and it should not be political. But what we're finding is morality tied to ideology rather than to common decency. And it is wrong. I kind of went through a little bit, of a debate with some people on Twitter about this. You can see another one of his pedophilic tweets right here, where he talks about how much he enjoys having little boys touch him in his private parts. How can this be defended just because he's a liberal? How? It's indefensible. Whether it is, somebody that, touched women or touched little boys, whether they were outed by conservatives or socialists or communists, the activity is separated from the politics, and we should agree that it is abhorrent regardless. But that is not happening, and we live in such a messed up world where the gut feeling for people is to support their tribe, and tribalism is anathema to freedom, which is why it comes up on Mostly Linux. You can see that our description there on Twitter is gaming with a touch of Linux and a libertarianish ethos. We are freedom, Linux, privacy, free markets, and mostly gaming. Okay? And tribalism is the opposite of freedom. And you should be aware of that, because freedom is about the right and the empowerment of the individual, and the right of the individual to be treated as a specific unit with its own rights, values, and judgment. You are not just a part of a race or a tribe or a nation. You are a person, a human individual, and your rights stem from that. And when we collectivize it, whether it is in the form of collectivizing it and giving rights to a race, or collectivizing and giving rights to an ideology, you move away from freedom. And you can see this in this particular case, where the ideology, the tribe, which humanity is prone to tribalism, just based on the way that we evolved through the aeons. But tribalism, of course, leads to dictatorship, to feudalism, to communism, to everything that is the opposite of freedom, and to the most heinous acts of violence in the history of the world. And that's where we are. That's the path that we are on, is moving away from individual rights and moving both right and left wing towards collectivism of different sorts. On the left, it becomes kind of race-based and socioeconomic-based tribalism. Maybe even they view things as being a type of feudalism, where people are just stuck and oppressed by an oligarchy, which is really all just kind of part of the same collectivist mentality. Then on the right, you have people that are focused on tribalism of a different sort, nation-based, nationalist-based tribalism, where my country first. Okay, your service is to your country. I'm going to look out for America or Canada and put trade tariffs on everybody else, right? Or it comes from a reaction to the left. So they react to the racism of the left by having a racism for the right, and basically saying, well, you are looking to promote race A, B, and C against race D, E, and F, and so we will promote the races that you are discounting. Then it becomes a race war, because it's the same for both sides. And so both sides, conservatives and liberals, are tribalist. And it's only... I don't call myself a libertarian for a reason, okay? Because there's a lot of crazy libertarians out there, and I don't support the Libertarian Party. I consider myself libertarianish, which means I am my own person. I am kind of so focused on the rights of individuals that I don't even want to be a part of a group called libertarian. That's a group, right? But before we kind of go into the insanity, my point being is that a libertarian-ish view is that the individual should be judged as an individual rather than as part of a collective. And judging this disgusting piece of trash that is James Gunn as an individual leads one to say, holy crap, how can this person be employed by anybody with any sense of decency, particularly a family-friendly firm like the Walt Disney Company? Period. Doesn't matter whether you're liberal, right? So when you then take the tribalism into it, it becomes a war between conservatives and liberals, and either side then tries to attack him, not because of the disgusting statements that he's made as an individual, but what it means to their team, to their tribe. And when you can use your ideology as the basis for, as the principal basis for either supporting or attacking a pedophile, then you are on the wrong track. I'll be back in 10 seconds with some final thoughts. And we're back with some final words here on episode 17 of At Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. Thank you for sticking to the end. Those few of you that may kind of listen through to the whole thing, I would appreciate a little bit of your help. Let me kind of just toss that out. You know, we're everywhere. At Mostly Linux is now pretty well everywhere. We get a lot more downloads on our audio podcast than on our video or our other locations. It could be actually that maybe we're spread so thin with so many different locations that we're not kind of concentrated on any one area. But maybe you can help a little bit by kind of, you know, helping us to spread the word. First of all, you know, I'm just going to go through all of the areas that we're at. So Mostly Linux, there's no underscore, mostlylinux.libsyn.com, libsyn.com. That's our main podcast site. So if you go there, you can see that, you know, you can find, you know, you can email us, you can visit us on Twitter, you can subscribe to the RSS feed. We're available on Apple, Stitcher, and Google Play right there on that site. You could also listen to it right on your web page right there. You know what? Click into some of these things and just, you know, give us a like, thumbs up, whatever the case might be. You know, let's see if we can get a few more people subscribed. And if you're not subscribing and you just kind of download it because you see it on Reddit or on Twitter or whatever, hit us subscribe and just kind of, you know, get it delivered straight to you through any of these means. You know, we'd appreciate it. You know, we've got a subreddit, so r/mostly_Linux. That's up to about 43 subscribers now, so, you know, not huge, but it is coming together. This is our main Reddit page. We're also on Linux gaming, and we're on Linux, and we're on the other things, but our giveaways and so forth are focused over here. So if you want to be a part of the community, if you want to basically be part of the discussion, join us over here on our mostly_Linux. We're also, of course, on Twitch. This podcast premieres every Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Sorry, it's Eastern Standard Time right now. Right on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/mostlylinux. I'm usually on during the premiere. If you guys want to pop in and chat, you know, please feel free to do so. We've got a good number of subscribers now. I think 91 followers. So thank you very much to all 91 of you. Maybe we can get that up to 100 over the next little while. Please follow, join us for the chat, and yeah, let's kind of build a really cool community here. We're also on peertube.social, so it's mostly underscore Linux over there. Our podcast's video is posted on PeerTube. We just started doing that. You know, we don't do badly over here. You know, we got 20 views for episode 15, 11 views for episode 16. Pretty good with limited promotion. I like PeerTube. You know, it's distributed, it's free, the quality not quite at par with YouTube, but you know, I mean, YouTube's got trillions of dollars, so what do you expect? We're also, if you prefer YouTube, mostly Linux on YouTube. We post both the audio only and the video feed right here. So please, you know, if that's your kind of way of doing it, subscribe over here. And of course, there's Twitter, which is our main form of communication. We've also got a Steam group, mostly underscore Linux group on Steam. We're up to about 45 members there as well. If you want to find cool people to play with, you know, multiplayer games, single player games, just have discussions, be part of giveaways, keep track of our announcements, just, you know, shoot out to mostly underscore Linux on Steam and join the group, and you'll be well taken care of over there. And that, my friends, is a wrap for episode 17 of our crazy at Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming podcast. I will see you next week. Have a good